Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 2 of the Games Talk Show. I'm your host, Karan Ganesh, and on this episode, I'm going to be talking to Nathan Rinehart, lighting artist at Turn 10 Studios. I'm super excited for this interview, so without any further ado, let's jump right in. Welcome to the Games Talk Show, Nathan, and thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, man.
So, before we get started, Nathan, could you introduce yourself to our audience today?
My name is Nathan Rinehart. I am a lighting artist currently at Turn 10. Been working in 3D production on a lot of different levels, from game design to commercials, for roughly 10, 11 years now. I'm just real happy to be here. I think what you're doing is great. It's awesome to see the connectivity between industry leaders and then how they're impacting the what we're going to see for the future.
Well, thank you so much. And that's really cool that you've been working for over 10 years right now. And Turn 10 especially is one
Yeah.
of the biggest studios of Microsoft. And it's amazing that, I can get to interact with somebody from there.
Oh, sure. Anytime, man. Yeah. Well, like I said, I think you're doing is great. So it's a real honor to be here.
Thank you.
Privilege is mine.
Thank you so much. Okay, so if you're ready, we can go ahead and get started with the questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, okay, my first question is, what is your role as a lighting artist at Turn 10 Studios?
Yeah, totally. So kind of not just a Turn 10, but lighting artists in general. We kind of, help to really finalize that look, the final look of the game. All the process that before that gets to us absolutely defines the visual language and everything, but we're sort of responsible for that final 90% that makes it just really pop, or really brings home the style, depending on what you're going for, realism versus stylistic. We handle everything from obviously lighting, very, very important. But we also look at camera functionality, exposure settings, that kind of stuff, color correction, refining the AO passes and things like that. So there's actually a lot to it, more than just putting a light in and letting it go. You got to find the balance and everything within the image, and then performance is always a big one. I'll probably mention that a lot today, because that is a lot of what we run into is how we can define that visual, hit that visual target while still being performant. So.
Wow. And just a quick question. So you mentioned about cameras and exposure as well. So do you have to be a little more proficient in terms of, the camera settings and, a lot more about how a camera works?
Yes, absolutely. It's very, very important to at least understand the relationship of exposure to what you're going to be viewing on the screen. A lot of not to jump too far ahead, but whether or not you're looking at walking into interior spaces to being right out in the open. It's very important to find that balance and understanding where the default comes from a physical real camera. Definitely helps in that process a lot. So. Yeah. And
Well,
just the
thank
more
you
you
for
know,
clearing
right?
that. Thank you for clearing that. Actually,
Yeah,
I just
absolutely.
like I've heard a lot of people saying that cameras and stuff. I'm like, okay, that's a nice name because I'm kind of interested in photography too. So I'm like, okay,
Sure.
this might apply here as well. So that's a pretty good thing.
Yeah. I'd say a lot of the people I've worked with as lighting artists, as skybox artists, have a very big interest in photography in the real world as well. Yeah. Yeah, and the gap is getting smaller and smaller too, where offline renders, Arnold, V-Ray, those are very physically based, so you almost need to
Hmm.
know what camera settings they were using for the shoot, or how to accomplish that. So yeah, absolutely, photography is very, very important for us. So.
That's awesome. Okay, so my next question is, what is a day in your life like at Turn 10?
Yeah, so at Turn 10, it's slightly different than some roles I'm doing. We're working to really develop the tool set right now too. A lot of changes going on in the industry, render techniques, things are getting better. So we're sort of finding that balance, creating those tools, helping to develop those tools that allow our game to really shine. But typically I end up getting in. I'm a little bit of a late start, so I end up getting in 9:30, 10 usually. Pull down the latest build and see what I did the day before, how that's impacting our current build, what it's looking like. From then, it's a lot of review. Bringing in art directors, lighting leads, sometimes programmers, devs. Let the leads of the dev team come over, and it's kind of just showing off the level. Finding those pretty angles that really show off your lighting and the quality of the level and stuff like that. And then kind of revision, you take the notes and you go and you implement those. That would be a day where we get a lot of art. Some days it's more seeing how the tools are working as are the buttons that you're wanting to press doing what you hope they do, things like that. So that's a little bit more rare for a lighting artist, to be honest, to really get into the dev side and help develop those tools. But at Turn 10, like I said, we're sort of, I don't want to say revamping, but we're fixing up our pipeline and stuff. So that's been a part of it. It's been a large part of what I've been doing here at Turn 10.
Awesome. So you mentioned that, lighting is not just as easy as placing a light in a scene, but it has a whole process to it. So could you tell me what the lighting pipeline looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll start by getting, not a finished level, but a base, a white box, if you will. You start with the global stuff, getting a skybox in, making sure it's looking right. If you're exterior, you're getting your sunlight. It's obviously a dominant light source that you really need to make sure that's working properly. And then from there, it's just kind of honestly iteration after iteration. You get feedback from all sorts of different sources, and you got to find a way to combine those and get those looking right. So yeah, I'd say the pipeline kind of goes getting the base level. You get the fundamentals in, like I said, sun, skybox, sun, those kind of things, your major light sources. And then you kind of go through review and iteration on it and see how, just see how it looks. Once more assets start coming in, there's part of it that is giving feedback on how materials are looking or how they're interacting with our lighting, or UV spaces for light maps and stuff like that, if those are working properly. A big part is knowing how to problem solve those too. You gotta know what the issue is, before you send out a bug, essentially. And then from there, it becomes polished. Once your base light is in, and people are liking it, you end up really popping into refinement. That really polished step of color grading, settings, various exposure settings, and things like that. Yeah, I mean that's been my experience, at least. It's a lot of feedback and a lot of fixing what you can.
Okay, that's great. And so my next question is, people, when they often tend to get into lighting, they kind of like jump right into it. But what are some of the things that they need to understand and focus on when they go ahead to light a scene?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the biggest things from lighting, you get your mood, compositions, and the overall style and appeal of the level. I think the big things to focus on are what is nice lighting. The relationships between your direct and your bounce lights. That's a huge thing. That's very important to make sure that's reading properly. Yeah, don't know that it comes in layers too. Your light by itself, your one direct sunlight by itself, isn't going to look that great until you get your bounce in. Until you get your AO passes in. Until you're really refining that color graded version. You see a lot of current art or levels out there. People just think, oh, it's just light and light, but there's a lot of layers to it, and understanding what you're going to accomplish from each pass as well, is very important. So no, it just doesn't all come through with just the direct light, or just your one light. It's got to be, a layered system that you eventually polish to the end. And so keeping that in mind is very important, and don't get discouraged when it kind of looks rough. That's part of the process. So, yeah, other than that, I would say knowing, color theory, obviously incredibly important. Knowing how lights are meant to interact, understanding the physics of light and how it should be looking when it's bouncing off of a very reflective surface versus a non-reflective surface, or a very colorful surface. Knowing what you're expected to see and then trying to accomplish that. That's something very, very important to look out for.
Okay, yeah, I think that probably gives a better understanding on how people should at least start an approach when they go ahead and light a scene. So my next question is, what are some of the differences in the pipeline between an indoor lighting scene versus an outdoor lighting scene?
Yeah, I find, at least for me, my process is very similar. I always feel like you start with your established light, your very direct lights, your key light, whatever you want to call that there. That's always very important, and then supplementing that with secondary lighting. The difference I find between interiors and exteriors is more about what tools you're using, what lights you're able to use. depending on the software you're using, how that implements, whether it's done through volumes that people walk through, on interior spaces, or for example, like when you're using interior space, you're using a lot more reflection cubes, reflection spheres, and as opposed to exterior, where you're taking a lot of what you're getting from the dome, things like that. But really, the idea behind the lighting is the same. You're looking for what the proper output from your direct lighting is, and what that should be, how that should be accomplished in your secondary mounts and stuff like that. Definitely differences in atmosphere, the way you control atmosphere on an interior scene versus an exterior. Not a lot of just dense fog happens typically on an interior unless you're kind of going that vibe. So, knowing what's important to use in a certain instance is definitely a key difference between those two. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, definitely. I think also, like, the vibe that you're trying to set up also really matters up a lot, because, like you were mentioning, I've not seen many scenes where there's a lot of fog right inside the room, but I think,
Right.
yeah, that kind of establishes as well the differences between, an indoor as well as an outdoor scene.
Yeah. And I think it does come down to the tools,
Mm-hmm.
how you use them in those different instances. It's not like I use different, completely different tool set to do an interior versus an exterior. It's just kind of how you apply them, versus more versus the theory behind it. I think if you have a good fundamental understanding of the lighting pipeline, I keep going back to the relationships, but that's kind of the key. You'll be fine either way. You're just tuning to taste and interior.
Yeah,
Oops,
true.
sorry. Cat's getting crazy.
Okay, so my next question is, what are some of the challenges faced by artists who try to achieve a realistic lighting look for a scene?
uh Man, yeah, challenges there. It really is capturing those accurate values. Knowing how much you push the sun, knowing what you're going to get out of the indirect. That really comes in. I mean, you got to have great materials. You got to have all that being very physically accurate as well. So it's knowing when it's something that falls on the material versus the light, right? Like if I have a sun and it's really, I feel like it's really nice, but it's just hitting objects really oddly. It's time to look at, like, okay, is that what I'm doing? Is that the light itself? Is that the material interaction? Things like that. And then really, again, coming back to those ratios, especially on an exterior scene, you get as much information from your secondary lighting, your bounce lighting, for accuracy as you do from the sun itself. And then knowing those interactions between your camera's exposures, things like that, how that light should be interacting. And then not just interacting, but actually visually correct too. A lot of that does come from what you're setting up in your camera, things like that. So as far as like advice, just keep an eye out, photo reference, look at pictures. I mean, that's the best way to kind of understand if you're on the right or wrong path. But really evaluating those ratios, make sure your sunlight is interacting with the space around it, and bouncing correctly to kind of accomplish that feel. And color
Okay.
temperature, I will say that too.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think, between like the more like warm and cool tones, I think that kind of really matters too.
Exactly, absolutely.
Hmm.
But
But yeah,
and even then making sure oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry. Well,
No.
just making sure your skylighting
Hmm.
is reacting properly too. Very, very important. You gotta make sure your sky dome is set up properly. And I know it's kind of a silly thing to say, but making sure you're actually getting HDR performance out of your skybox. It's been in past jobs, it's been like, oh yeah, we're full HDR, and then we come to realize we're not actually using HDR in our skybox. And
Hmm.
you're like, oh, okay, that's kind of where that issue came into play. So, so just making sure everything's set up right.
Hmm.
Very important too to get that that accurate feel.
Okay, but I was also going to mention that, a lot of the game trailers as well that we see and the games that we play, they all are trying to, feature, like, if you look at the AAA games now, they're featuring realistic lighting that, it's exactly how you see in the world is what you exactly see in the game. And I think that, lighting really has a big part to play in that. So, I mean,
Absolutely.
achieving this realistic lighting is something which is a great accomplishment, but also at that time, trying to, make the player feel like they're in the real world when they're playing that
Mhm.
game.
Yeah, absolutely, and I agree. I think it's 90% of the lighting you're using, and I think that's also why we're seeing such big strides in that in our industry. The realism of it is because we are starting to realize how to capture photorealistic lighting, photometric values in an actual game setting, which is relatively new. I mean, they've been coming along on that for a while, but it's really getting insane now. With how accurate things are. Default using actual real world settings, candelas and lumens, rather than just the old way of like you have a multiplier and it does this value. The fact you can actually just look up a new, oh, what is this light and what is its actual lumens power output, and you can type that in and get a accurate reading of that is pretty interesting and insane. And I think that does speak to how it's coming along with the realistic rendering and everything.
Definitely. I think, a lot of people are sold by how the game looks right now, and it really, really, it's going to go a long way, as you mentioned, from here.
Oh yeah. I'm really excited to see where we're going to push Forza. Right. I mean, I think it's going to be quite exciting. We're seeing some internal stuff that's like, whoa, that's wow. Like even if someone's been around for a while, I'm like,
Hmm.
I don't know how we're doing this. At a real time, 60 frames per second and stuff. It's quite impressive, and it does come down to the tech a lot too.
Definitely. Yeah. I'm really excited, for the next Forza to come out. My friends are
Okay.
like real crazy about, these car racing games, and I'm like, okay, I've played a little bit of the previous Forza games, and I'm like, okay, the trailer for this new one looks amazing. I'm like, I really can't wait for it to come out right now.
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure to have them allow us to focus on that too, the artistic
Hmm.
side, the beauty, the beautification of the game and stuff. It's been really exciting. Yeah.
Definitely. I'm really waiting for that game now. Okay, so we did see the demo of Unreal Engine 5 a couple of months back, and we saw them doing cool stuff with the global illumination. So, what are your thoughts on that, and how do you think it might, alter the lighting pipeline?
Um, yeah, I mean, the whole idea, of real-time GI and real-time secondary bounces is really, it is fundamentally altering how we light. We don't have to do as much in the light maps. We don't have to rely on that as much. So we're getting, real-time feedback on our GI system. Even what Unreal is doing right now is really impressive. The Lumen system blew my mind, obviously. like that demo just looked amazing. I mean, part of me is like, yeah, we'll see how it goes, without a perfectly set up model and all that stuff. But absolutely super excited. And it does fundamentally change what we do. It's going to be a lot more focus on what I said about capturing those realistic values, making sure things are reading realistically and your camera's set up that way. Just because you're going to get so much of it in a, I don't want to say pre-cached, but sort of a predefined algorithm, that generates our lighting. And yeah, I mean, just fundamentally, that's going to change how much we can do, like the amount a single lighting artist can accomplish. And yeah, really just the pretty image that it will make. I do have a few reservations where I just like, I really want to see the tool, get it in hand, try it on a actual game where you have a dude running through, with all the overhead of the code running on top of it and stuff. But I'm absolutely excited to see where that goes. Looked amazing. Looked at. I was blown away. I had to watch like 4 times, being like, no way, that's amazing. And then to hear that's on a PlayStation, I was just like, wait a minute, that to me just does not read properly, but it's super exciting to see what happens, just because it's so good, it makes me wonder how when it gets into the hand of the artist, it's either going to go insane, or you'll start seeing like, oh, okay, yeah, it takes a little bit more finesse than what they originally showed. But I'm excited about it either way. So, sorry.
Yeah, well, I'm really hoping to see something really new with that, and wanting to see how it kind of changes and alters, like I was mentioning, the pipeline.
Yes.
Okay, so my next question is focused towards a little more of students. So, what are some of the requirements and prerequisites that students and people need to have before they get to becoming a lighting artist?
Yeah, um, it's really all about your portfolio. Your demo reel, whatever mode you choose to display your work. They want to know you can create a pretty image. You understand those relationships. You understand what color does for mood, and what composition can do for a shot or a level. It's very important. I mean, that's what we do. A lot of it is finding that artistic or accomplishing that artistic vision for whoever is directing you. So they really, I mean, above all, they want to see a nice shot, right? You got to have it look pretty. Not just tech demo kind of stuff, but actually refined shots where you're adding some atmosphere, you're adding some glow effects, sun flares, those things. They got to know that how to use those and use them well. And don't crutch on things. Don't crutch on like a bunch of atmosphere in your shot just to cover up some bad lighting, on the back, in the back of it or something like that. So I mean, demo pieces are incredibly important. I would say also something that's helped a lot, especially with the interview stage, is showing them the process, right? Showing them that what a key light should be doing. So you show your key light pass, and then you show how that looks with fill light added in. Then you show how that looks with some atmosphere added in, and then your color correction. And showing that what to accomplish with each stage is very, very important. And your lighting lead will absolutely love that if you can see your progress, or see your progression of how you develop a shot or an environment. Very, very important as well. And don't show something not great. If it's look to see what's going on ArtStation, on CG Society. Like, look at what the current modern look is, and make sure you're accomplishing that on your side as well, as best you can, at least, of course. So and knowing the full pipeline, knowing how to model, knowing material development, all that stuff is very, very important too, so you can kind of help the process along. You're not just stuck being like, well, I don't know why this isn't working, and send it off to the material artist. Like, know how to evaluate a shader to say like, okay, look, this is what I'm seeing, and this is what I need to get from it and stuff. I think all that's very important. But yeah, I mean, above all, just a nice, pretty looking image. Make sure it looks nice is what I'd say.
But yeah, speaking of portfolio, what kind of lighting scenes do recruiters desire to look like? Is it like character lighting or indoor, outdoor? How much of each would they like to see, or what exactly is something that they prefer?
From my experience, this is just me. I can't say I've ever been asked like, oh, I wish you had this kind of scene or this kind of scene. You can make a real character driven lighting piece out of not characters, right? You can use hard surface, take a car and put some beautiful lighting on it, that serves as well as a character, true like three-dimensional character piece. I would say variety is very important, not just in what you're showing as far as like subject matter, but how your lighting is looking, right? Have some very muted tone lighting, so almost what's the word I'm looking for? Sorry. Very desaturated, monotone lighting. Have some very vibrant lighting. They're going to appreciate a lot of it. And if the fundamentals are there, the people that are hiring you will see that. That you understand that relationship and can create that. And the more you can do, I say just more and more, like keep, even if you're not 100% satisfied with something, the recruiter and your lead are not necessarily going to see the same issues you see. So as long as, the best thing I can say to do is sometimes start a new level, try a new thing, and take then what you've learned from that and try to go back if you need to. I know it's kind of contradictory to what I was saying about only show good stuff, but once you've looked at a piece for long enough, you start picking out all the tiny little details where really the overall effect is probably nice. So I would say variety, and don't force yourself into something you don't want to work on either. If you're not excited about what you're doing, I don't think you're going to fully give it your all and really capture the best it can be. So so I'd say to that, I can't ever say I've been like really needing, oh, I wish I'd had this, or if a recruiter have ever said, hey, you should have this in your portfolio. But so I don't 100% know how to answer that question, to be honest with you. And things change. I mean, every art director is different. Every lead that you're going to have is going to be different and want to see something. And if they're truly interested in it, they'll give you a test, right? So they'll give you a level and be like, look, like this, like, yeah, and they'll give you some guidelines and things like that that you have to follow. And so that will, a lot of times becomes the pivotal thing of what gets you that job too. Um, yeah, and for recruiters, just make sure your resume is nice. Give make sure you're, in your skills section, you're talking, you're talking about your skills and that are relevant to what you're trying to get hired for too. And list the programs. I think that's huge in getting past, just getting past the recruiter into the manager phase where you're actually interviewing the people that are going to be making the decision. I've found with recruiters, it's often more about checking some boxes, and then you really get into the art discussion when you're talking to the hiring manager or whoever. But yeah, I would say, recruiters are incredibly important in this industry. You gotta be nice to them. You gotta like them, and definitely talk to them. That's a huge thing too, is just let them know you're available. They'll do their best to get you in contact with the right people. So, but yeah, really with them, just make sure your resume is nice, like, easy to read, functional, list your good skills, list your programs, and really tight and buttoned up. You don't need a lot of superfluous info. You just need what's really important to the job too.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that. I think that really covers on even I wanted to know, kind of was curious about what should be done for it, but it kind of really gives a good aspect on that. And so one other question that I had was kind of going back to the camera stuff. So does cinematography lighting also have any relation between the game lighting that you guys utilize?
Absolutely. Oh, 100%. Yeah. I not just in cinematics, right? From just a fundamental thing or from just a core thing. If you have cinematics in your game, you're basically doing film lighting, right? You're lighting the scene to be that specific shot. But even in that, if you're talking about just the game world itself, absolutely, there's all sorts of ways you can improve the compositions and the image itself. Finding those areas to rim light, finding ways to do it. In that, playing the game you're making is very important. Like, it's always a great idea to run through your level and see what the player's seeing, and then that way you can really start to guide their eye, and that's a big part of it, is getting the player to look where you want them to look, to either progress through that level or to just to have control of where they're looking. It's very important, and I think it carries over all the principles of cinematography lighting do absolutely carry over. Finding your sorry, the image quality that allows them to look at an image and just instantly be like, oh, this is gorgeous, and this is where my eye should go. Yeah, absolutely becomes very vital for even a world development, like when you're developing lighting for the world rather than cinematic shots. But probably becomes more so important with cinematics, right? Right, because then you're literally just doing film essentially. And so yeah, when you're looking at your camera settings, your depth of field, your focus, your focal length, like deciding what camera you're using to really get that intimate moment or that more abstracted setup shot or whatever. Yeah, it's absolutely important to look at all that, and really analyze it from a film cinematic mindset. Absolutely. So the more films you watch, I feel like the better you are too.
I'm really interested in game cinematics, and I think that really helped out because I've been trying to experiment a lot with it, and I'm like, okay, I'm not entirely sure about how lighting works, so I think maybe you can take references from movies, like you were saying, and the more movies you watch,
Oh,
the better
absolutely.
ideas that you get. Definitely. Well,
Yeah,
thank you so much,
absolutely.
Nathan. That's all the questions that I had for you today, and I got to learn
Okay,
so much about lighting and
good.
about everything. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I really appreciate the time, man. It's like I said, it's a fun thing to do. I'm excited to see this. Been really enjoying your podcast too. I've been going back on season 1 and just listening to the pros. It's just like, oh man, it's really great. Like, they're all so humble and just nice to see.
Thank you so much. Your compliments are really mean a lot to me, especially taking your time out from the industry just to help out people. It really means a lot to me as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, keep at it, man. It's like I can see this going somewhere. So
Thank you so much. And that's it for this episode. Make sure you guys drop a like button if you enjoyed the video and hit that subscribe button because more interviews are going to be coming up really soon. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll talk to you in the next one.